Hello, thank you so much for joining us. President Trump is headed for a legal showdown after a chaotic weekend of protests in Los Angeles County. The state of California is suing the Trump administration over its decision to deploy the National Guard to the LA area. President Trump activated around 2,000 National Guard troops in response to protests over his immigration crackdown. CBS News is now learning the military has about 700 active duty Marines on high alert and could mobilize them in the coming days. Now, this all started Friday when crowds gathered outside a federal detention center in downtown Los Angeles to protest ICE raids across the city. On Saturday, the protests expanded south to the nearby cities of Paramount and Compton. That's when President Trump ordered the National Guard to support law enforcement, even though state officials did not ask for the help. The protests continued on Sunday with hundreds of people temporarily blocking one of the city's main highways. President Trump has been active on Truth Social. He wrote this about the protesters, quote, "If they spit, we will hit. And I promise you they will hit harder than they have ever been hit before." Earlier, the president also said he wouldn't be against his border czar, Tom Homan, arresting California Governor Gavin Newsom. He was later asked to clarify that during an event at the White House.
What crime has Governor Newsom committed?
A crime has he committed?
Yeah, to warrant his arrest, as you had
suggested earlier. I think his primary crime is running for governor because he's done such a bad job. What he's done to that state is like what Biden did to this country. And that's pretty bad.
CBS Evening News anchor John Dickerson posed the same question to President Trump's so-called border czar, Tom Homan.
On what grounds would you arrest Gavin Newsom?
Well, that whole thing's been taken out of context. And I made it clear they haven't crossed the line yet. But like any other U.S. citizen, just like they did to President Trump, if you cross that line, when they've said for 4 years, no one's above the law, right? So I don't care who they are, the governor, the mayor, wherever. When you commit a crime against ICE officers, we will seek prosecution.
California officials say the decision to deploy the National Guard was, quote, unnecessary, counterproductive, and unlawful. In an interview Sunday, Governor Newsom said the president is trying to make a statement.
This is about authoritarian tendencies. This is about command and control. This is about power. This is about ego. My way or the highway. This is a consistent pattern of practice, of recklessness.
We have CBS News team coverage on the Los Angeles protests. Correspondent Elise Preston is on the ground in L.A. White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi and Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane are both in Washington. Elise, I want to start with you. When we talked to you earlier today, it was a calmer scene. I see that there's a little bit more activity behind you. Describe the scene for us today, and can you give us a sense of how widespread the protests have become?
Well, Tom, there's been a lot of activity out here. Now, let me step out of the way so you can get a closer look at what has happened. You're seeing a bunch of L.A. officers swarm the area right here. You see them in tactical gear. Now, there were just a large crowd of protests. There was a large crowd of protesters right here. Those protesters have been pushed back. This was deemed an unlawful assembly, and so they were told that they needed to clear. So what you're seeing now is more officers move in right here along this Alameda Street. We're on the overpass of the 101, and right behind us is the federal building. This is where chaos has erupted over the last several days. And so we saw a lot of it earlier today. We were here just about 2 hours ago where the crowd, they started to get, they went from peaceful to more volatile. They were throwing water bottles at agents' vehicles. They were kicking those vehicles as they were trying to get through. And on the opposite side, the street is shut down. Keep in mind, we are at the beginning of rush hour here in LA traffic. And as I'm standing on this overpass, this 101 highway, the traffic is moving. That was not the case yesterday. Protesters were able to get down on the bridge and shut it down. So we've seen a lot of scenes unfold throughout the last several days, definitely some today. But again, officers have pushed back these protesters in the area. This was just declared an unlawful assembly.
Yeah, certainly still a tense situation. Now, other news coming out of California today. California now suing the Trump administration. What can you tell us about the state's lawsuit?
Well, the state says that Trump had no right to move. The president had no right to move the National Guardsmen in. It was under control. And so the state says that for the president to make that move, it was illegal. And Governor Gavin Newsom has said from the beginning that it was never about crowd control. It was about trying to manufacture chaos.
Elise Preston on the ground for us. Elise, please stay safe. Thank you. CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi joins us now. So, Olivia, good to see you again. How is the president justifying the response to the LA protests?
Well, good evening, Tom. It's good to be with you. The president said earlier today on True Social that if he didn't act and activate the National Guard, then Los Angeles would have been obliterated. But as you heard Elise just say there, that these protests have been largely sporadic and smaller in nature. They haven't encompassed the entire city or the entire county of L.A. But the president nonetheless saying it was a necessary move and blaming Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass of Los Angeles for their actions, saying that it contributed to the violence there. They also cited our CBS News polling from over the weekend, which found that the majority of Americans agree with this administration's actions on immigration, which, as we know, is the basis for all of these protests that we're seeing. In fact, the communications director, Stephen Chung, said that after Trump's actions on the National Guard and sending them to California, that will cause his numbers to actually rise, positive numbers to rise on immigration. Tom?
Olivia, as you've been following developments out of the White House, what has President Trump said about potentially invoking the Insurrection Act, which would let him fully deploy the U.S. military and use it against civilians?
Well, on Sunday, he was asked about this specifically, and he said, depends whether or not there is an insurrection or not. He was then asked about it again, if whether or not he thought there was an insurrection taking place in Los Angeles. He said, no, but you have violent people, and we're not going to let them get away with it. And of course, we've seen him continually attack the people, protesters on True Social, telling them not to wear masks, saying that more needs to be done to quell these protests. But so far, has not said whether or not he thinks what's happening in Los Angeles at this moment amounts really to an insurrection.
Yeah, something we're certainly going to be following very closely. Olivia Rinaldi in Washington for us. Olivia, thank you. All right, now let's go over to CBS News Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane, also in Washington for us. Scott, what are we hearing from law enforcement officials about the way the White House has handled what's going on in Los Angeles?
Well, you're getting kickback from the local officials in California. That doesn't mean the president's lost the support of other law enforcement agents around the country. He has some close allies in police organizations and among local sheriffs and local police chiefs out and about. But I tell you, here in Washington, D.C., there is this concern among the police who responded on January 6th, Tom, that there's some form of hypocrisy going on here in the way the president and his top security officials are characterizing Los Angeles versus the way they characterized January 6th, which, of course, the president landed in the White House on Inauguration Day and then quickly doled out 1,500-plus pardons for U.S. Capitol riot defendants. There's concern that he's used the word insurrection to characterize some component of what's going on in Los Angeles, but denies the insurrection here at the Capitol January 6th. There's concern that Trump officials have said hit a cop and go to jail. The FBI director posted that this weekend, whereas the president pardoned hundreds of people who were charged with hitting, gassing, or clubbing police officers on January 6th. All of this concern about hypocrisy risks fueling the politics and the heat that are already burning over Los Angeles.
I want to dig into what you just said, Scott, about the January 6th insurrection. Just last month, the Trump administration paying nearly $5 million to the family of January 6th rioter Ashley Babbitt, who was shot and killed by a member of law enforcement while trying to break into the House Speaker's lobby. How is the administration squaring this with what they are doing in Los Angeles?
There are other contrasts, too, Tom. You mentioned a good one. As they criticize those who've confronted police in Los Angeles, the Trump administration has approved a settlement to give taxpayer money to the family of Ashley Babbitt, who, of course, was on the front lines of the riot January 6th, was entering a breached window into the U.S. House Speaker's lobby when she was shot and killed by police. Their other contrasts would include the criticisms of the Mexican flags being waved in Los Angeles without acknowledging the Confederate flags that were at the Capitol on January 6th. Concerns about the wanted posters that have been put out seeking information for those who are accused of assaulting police in Los Angeles, as they pulled down the wanted posters that still existed ahead of Inauguration Day for the dozens of people they're still pursuing from the U.S. Capitol siege. These contrasts are going to further marinate all of what we're seeing in Los Angeles in the politics of the moment.
There's been a lot of commentary coming out of the White House, perhaps one of the more eyebrow-raising comments made by the president. He said he would support federal immigration officials arresting California's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom for interfering with immigration arrests. Take a listen.
Gavin Newsom he's daring Tom Homan to come and arrest him. Should he do it? I would do it if I were Tom. I think it's great. Gavin likes the publicity, but I think it would be a great thing.
Scott, explain this to me. Is this rooted in reality? Is this just rhetoric? Is there a legal justification for Newsom's arrest?
I think the governor's supporters would say that is a baseless idea, that he has done something that would require his arrest. But you can get the connective tissue pretty quickly to other cases that have been filed by this Department of Justice. They have charged a New Jersey congresswoman for allegedly interfering with police May 9th at a Newark, New Jersey immigration facility. They've charged a judge in Milwaukee, accused her of obstructing immigration agents who are outside her courtroom. Those would previously have been thought to be unthinkable types of arrests and types of cases against public officials. So at this moment, I think it's wise to keep all possibilities in mind.
Yet another flashpoint in the immigration debate. Scott MacFarlane, we know you'll stay on top of it. Scott, thank you.